I'm what you could call an AV geek. I know a lot about obscure dead media formats you likely never heard of. My collection expansive. Beta tape, CED, even a Telefunken TED I had imported 2 years back. But my favorite format has to be LaserDiscs. Now, they say that on the early LaserDiscs, back when they were called DiscoVision, the disc had only contained one side of programming, and had dead sides. The dead sides containing hidden program material. The flip side of the disc would be made null by a thin coating of lacquer, just enough for the laser to be made unable to read the disc. Being the fan I am of anything involving LaserDiscs, the moment I had read about the rumors of hidden content on my favorite obscure media form, I figured I might as well try to unearth it for myself and find out what these dead sides might contain. Maybe I'll come across some interesting lost media. So I took to eBay to find one of these original discs. Fortunately for me, or maybe just a little too conveniently, I found a used copy of Tom Sawyer for less than $15. I placed my order and began the waiting game. Days later, the package arrived on my doorstep and waited for me like an orphan baby at my stoop. When I saw the package, I almost felt my stomach lurch, which at the time I assumed was from the excitement of it all, rather than the uncertainty my subconscious was sensing. I brought the package inside, pulling out my pocket knife and slicing swiftly through the sleek packing tape on the box, and opened the bad boy up, cardboard hissing as the flaps of the box scraped against one another. I pulled back the bubble wrap, throwing it aside for my cat, pulling out my treasure. Admittedly, the sleeve for the disc looked rather goofy and dated, as it had the brand name DiscoVision plastered across it in a gaudy, funky font, along with a split down the middle, replicating the collar of a 70s disco jumpsuit. I chuckled a little to myself at how funny this looked, now in 2018. Tom Sawyer's face was right in the center of the split. I only imagined how genius the people who designed this sleeve must have felt at the time. If only they knew how ridiculous it looked now. After nodding my head gently at the disc, I took it into my media room where I kept all of my various formats and players so I could get to work. After all, I did have a mystery to solve. Once I was sat comfortably in my favorite armchair, I gently removed the disc from its sleeve to examine it before determining what measures I had to take to remove the lacquer. After giving the dead side a quick glance over, I decided I might be able to get it off with a little bit of alcohol. After rubbing the disc down for about 2.5 hours, feeling rather smug, I decided the disc was ready to play. I turned on my trusty Trinitron and then loaded my newly delacquered disc into the player and took my seat again, already on edge, ready to find out what was waiting for me. My heart pounded in my chest as the player whirred loudly, and I almost couldn't wait. I wanted to know so badly. The screen lit up, cold and blue, as I shook my fists a little and bounced a little in my seat. A brief frame count appearing before the recorded program began. The screen now crackly with a faint buzzing in the background. It was tinted orange, and psychedelic shapes began to fly around the screen as a pleasant overture played, the shapes now turning to the DiscoVision logo. I assumed the crackliness may have been because of any leftover lacquer I couldn't get completely off. I leaned closer, now even more ready for whatever was next. Of course, whatever I was expecting was not what I got. It swiftly cut, at breakneck speed, to a close-up of a woman's bloodshot eyes, and I almost jumped a little, clutching my chest and breathing heavily. I calmed myself as they were just eyes, but that's only because the real hell hadn't begun yet. It cut to a tall, burly man busting into the room, almost knocking the door from its hinges. He began to speak an unfamiliar language to a sickly, pale-looking woman who was laying in bed, staring off into space. The woman didn't respond, which only agitated the man, as he repeated himself louder. Grumbling because of her lack of answer, he stomped out of the room angrily. His tone of voice had sent shivers down my spine, as did the woman's 10-mile stare. This was giving me an uneasy feeling, but maybe there'd be an explanation, so I continued on. Surely this was just some odd European art film, and nothing more, right? The movie cut to a different scene, showing the man and woman outside, possibly at a park, as they watched who I assumed was their child playing on the swings. The man was speaking to the woman who was sitting next to him, quite harshly, as she just meekly responded what I assumed to be no repeatedly. Each time he spoke, he only got angrier, until he lost his patience with her completely, grabbing her by the hair, causing her to cry, as he dragged her to the roundabout and began smashing her head into the bars as she cried. I was shocked. This looked much too real. He grumbled something to her as he gripped her hair tightly in his fist, yanking her head back and yelling the question into her now bruised face again. She replied meekly, as blood oozed out of a cut on her cheek. He grunted and shoved her into the ground, and she cried. I was very uncomfortable now. I began to doubt if this was even a film. It cut back to the bedroom, where the woman was just a shell of her former self. The cut now a scar on her face, she continued to stare into space. She appeared to tense as stomping was heard, and the man came into the room again, clearly inebriated. The man began yelling as he lifted a bottle of vodka and shaking it violently at him, some coming out of the bottle and splashing the woman. She twitched and blinked, clearly uncomfortable and tense. The man narrowed his eyes, assuming that she wasn't listening, and then grabbed her by her dark curls again and got in her face and yelled at her. She was very clearly holding back tears as he forced her to stand up. He jabbed her in the chest with his index finger and talked to her in a very condescending tone as she balled her fist. "Yet," she said, as she tried to shove him away, but this only made him angrier. He was so furious that he smashed the bottle of vodka on her head, knocking her out. He now seemed to panic a little as he picked her up and shook her, trying to get her to come back to consciousness, to no avail. Out of frustration, he threw her at the bed, and there was a sickening sound of her being impaled on the sharp bedpost. I felt ill. Her lifeless body began to secrete blood. The man was startled. He hadn't meant to do that. He appeared sickened as well. In his eyes, it was clear he was considering his options, but after what I'd witnessed so far, I could have never expected it to get worse. But it did. He pulled her off the bedpost, causing a disgusting slicing noise as more blood oozed from her midsection. I almost lost my lunch then, but it only got worse. It cut to him taking her to his work shed, and he grabbed his axe from the log beside it and went inside to get to work. He dropped her to the ground and raised the axe, and then let it down onto her. Sickening crunching sounds of bone breaking and blood and organs splattering only made me feel more ill. That was when I was absolutely sure this wasn't just a regular film. He continued to let the axe down on her until she was nothing more than a pile of disgusting, bloody meat. The film ended by zooming into the face of the man, now covered in blood, as he panted and licked his lips as it faded to static and the disc errored. I was trembling and drenched in sweat as tears rolled down my cheeks. I breathed heavily and uneasy. What was I supposed to do with this? Take it to the police? What could they do with old European footage off of a LaserDisc? There wasn't any indication of the identities of the two people in this film. How would I even explain it anyway? I barely understood what I saw, and thinking about it made me ill. I shook my head. No, I had to destroy the disc, or at least get rid of it. I hastily got out of my car, practically ripped the disc out of the player, and began to smash it against the wall, until it was nothing more than small slivers of brittle aluminum cluttering my carpet. I sighed uneasily as I leaned against the wall, pressing my face into my palm. I heard inside. Whenever I close my eyes, all I can see is the woman's lifeless stare. Hey everyone, I hope you enjoyed today's video. If you want to see more, let me know in the comments below, and tell me what you thought of this narration. Make sure to follow me on Twitter for updates, and if you'd like to get early videos, shoutouts, and much more, I'd appreciate it if you check out my Patreon page. It's a place where you can help support my channel while getting awesome rewards in the process, and every pledge helps out a ton, no matter the size. So if you'd like to see all the rewards I offer and consider becoming a patron, it'd mean a ton to me if you'd click the link in the description and just check it out. And don't forget to show some love to the amazingly talented authors who make these narrations possible. Have a good night, everybody. Cheers.